The champagne flute felt cold and slick in my hand, a fragile stem of crystal that seemed to be the only thing tethering me to the opulent reality of my son's wedding reception. I stood partially hidden behind an enormous floral arrangement of white orchids and cascading ivy, the scent of lilies and gardenias thick in the air. From my vantage point, I had a perfect, horrifying view of my new daughter-in-law Chloe, leaning in close to her college roommate, her voice a conspiratorial murmur that was somehow both intimate and carrying. "The plan is airtight," Chloe whispered, her eyes gleaming with a triumph that chilled me to my bones. "We give it 6 months, a year tops. We document every little thing. When she forgets a name, repeats a story, seems confused, paying at a restaurant, my old contacts at the Adult Protective Services office will fast-track the evaluation. Once she's in the facility, petitioning for conservatorship over the estate will be a formality." The roommate, a willowy brunette, shifted uncomfortably. "Chloe, that seems extreme. She's only 62. Chloe's laugh was a sharp, brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. 62 and living alone in that massive, valuable brownstone. It's a liability. It's neglectful to let someone that age manage such a complex asset. And let's be honest, Liam deserves that property after a lifetime of her emotional manipulation." My blood didn't just run cold, it crystallized in my veins. The brownstone, the 4-story, brown-bricked heart of our family in the West Village, the one my late husband, Michael, and I scraped and saved 2x4, $285,000 in 1998. A fortune to us then, a pittance compared to its worth now. The one where Liam took his first steps on the worn Persian rug in the living room, where we hosted raucous Thanksgiving dinners that spilled from the formal dining room into the kitchen, where Michael, his body already frail but his spirit indomitable, had passed away in the master bedroom's afternoon light 5 years ago. Holding my hand, I took a sharp step back, my heel catching on the leg of a nearby high-top table. The glass in my hand trembled, sending tiny bubbles racing to the surface. Chloe's gaze flickered over, catching my movement. In an instant, the cunning strategist was gone, replaced by the picture-perfect bride. She waved, a delicate, graceful gesture, her smile radiant and utterly false. I lifted my own hand in a numb, automatic response, because that is the unspoken contract of motherhood. You smile, you wave, you pretend not to have just heard the blueprint for your own destruction, orchestrated by the woman now legally bound to your only child. But let me tell you something about pretending. After 62 years of being a daughter, a wife, a mother, and a widow, I am a virtuoso. "Mom, you okay?" Liam materialized beside me, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, his bow tie slightly askew. My son, my beautiful boy, with his father's kind eyes and my stubborn chin. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a long day, sweetheart," I managed, my voice sounding distant, filtered through cotton. "And all this excitement while Chloe wants to talk to you about Christmas. She has some ideas about new traditions we should start." He beamed, so proud, so utterly blind. "How lovely," I said, the words ash in my mouth. "We'll chat later." He squeezed my shoulder, a familiar, affectionate gesture that now felt like a brand. "I'm so glad you two are getting close." I watched him walk back to his bride, his posture straight and sure. I saw the little boy who used to cling to my leg at the playground, the teenager who'd sobbed in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart, the young man who'd promised, at his father's funeral, that he would always look after me. That man was now a stranger in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his arm snaking possessively around the waist of the woman who planned to bury me alive. I didn't go to the bar. I walked to the nearest server, snagged a full glass of champagne from his tray, and drained it in one long, unladylike gulp. The bubbles stung my throat, a welcome, physical pain. "Tell me," I thought, the single, clear idea, cutting through the static of my panic. "Do you believe in karma?" Because I had a feeling I was about to become its very personal, very deliberate instrument. 3 months earlier, Liam had brought Chloe home to the Brownstone for the first time. She was a vision, the kind of woman you see in advertisements for luxury real estate or high-end vodka. 29, with honey blonde hair that fell in artful waves, and a smile so brilliantly white it seemed to generate its own light source. "Mom, this is Chloe," Liam had said, his voice brimming with a awe I hadn't heard since he was a child, showing me a particularly intricate Lego spaceship. "Chloe, my mother, Evelyn, Mrs. Sullivan," Chloe had gushed, enveloping me in a hug that was all perfume and sharp angles. It is such an honor. Liam talks about you constantly, the legendary Evelyn, the architect who built her own firm from the ground up. I feel like I know you already. Her words were flawless, her delivery smooth as silk, and yet something about it felt rehearsed, like an audition piece she'd perfected. The cadence was just a little too perfect, the compliments just a little too specific. Please, call me Evelyn, and the honor is mine. Anyone who makes my son this happy is a friend of mine. We'd sat in the living room. My living room, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the faint, permanent scent of old books and lemon polish, and Chloe had performed a masterclass in She admired my Eames chair, complimented the custom-built shelving, and asked insightful questions about the structural renovation Michael and I had overseen in 2005. How did you two meet? I'd asked, sipping my tea, at a charity auction for the New York Public Library. Liam jumped in, a little too quickly. We were both bidding on the same first edition. I let her win. Chloe had laughed, a tinkling, musical sound. Liam is being gallant. He crushed me, but he was so charming about it, I had to forgive him. I insisted on buying him a drink to console his loss. It was a good story, a romantic story, but even then, a small, cold knot of suspicion formed in my gut. Liam had never mentioned a charity auction. He hated black tie events. And what do you do, Chloe? I'd asked. I'm a life transition consultant, she'd said smoothly. I used to work specifically with seniors and their families, helping them navigate later in life changes, but I've recently expanded my practice to include executive wellness, life transition consultant. It was such a vague, modern title, but the part that stuck with me, the part that should have been a blaring air raid siren, was seniors and their families. She knew the system, she knew the language, the paperwork, the levers to pull to declare an older person incapable. Over the next few weeks, Chloe became a fixture. She'd stop by with extra pastries from a bakery miles out of her way. Just to check in, she'd rearrange my pantry while helping me put away groceries. Citing the principles of organizational psychology, she'd offer unsolicited advice on my finances, my garden, my sleep schedule. You know, Evelyn, she'd said one evening, examining the framed photographs on my mantelpiece. Liam mentioned you still manage the family trust yourself. That's so brave. With the market being so volatile, and all the new it must be incredibly stressful. I've been balancing ledgers and reading prospectuses since the 1980s. Chloe, I think I can manage. Of course, she'd said, her smile never wavering. I just meant, maybe it's time to let Liam shoulder some of that burden. It would be such a weight off your mind. Liam, who, until Chloe, had shown as much interest in our finances as he did in watching paint dry. Liam, who had asked me for a $15,000 loan, just 8 months prior to cover a bad investment in a friend's startup. I'll take it under advisement, I'd said, my tone leaving no room for further discussion. The changes in my son were the most painful to witness. Our standing Sunday night phone calls, a ritual since he left for college, were now frequently canceled. Sorry, Mom. Chloe and I are doing a sound bath meditation. Our monthly lunch dates at our favorite Italian spot became sporadic, then ceased altogether. Chloe thinks our relationship is a little enmeshed. She says it's healthy for me to establish more independence. Enmeshed, what a clinical, ugly word for a mother and son who had relied on each other to survive the cataclysm of a husband and father's death. 2 weeks after the charity auction story, Liam announced they were moving in together, into the SoHo loft I owned, a property I'd purchased as a rental investment in 2016 for $1.2 million. The loft I'd let him live in temporarily, at a deeply reduced rent, after he'd been laid off from his graphic design firm. It's perfect, Mom, he'd said, pacing the length of my kitchen while Chloe sat serenely on a stool, observing, the light is incredible, and the space is exactly what we need to start our life together. That's wonderful, Liam. Have you given any thought to the financials? The mortgage, the maintenance fees? His face had fallen, a look of genuine confusion clouding his features. I thought we could work something out. You know, family rates. Chloe had reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cool. Evelyn, I hope you don't think I'm influencing Liam in a negative way. The last thing I want is to create tension between you two. The last thing, right? I'm simply being practical. Chloe, business and family should have clear boundaries. Maybe we could do a phased approach, Chloe suggested, her voice dripping with reason. Liam could start by covering the condo fees and utilities. Then, in a few months, we could reassess the mortgage payments. I'd hate for him to feel financially overwhelmed right as we're starting our marriage. Financially overwhelmed by paying his own way at 34. That's a very structured plan, I'd said. Liam's shoulders had slumped in relief. See, I told you Chloe was a problem solver. She's amazing at this stuff. I bet she was. Within a month, they'd moved in. Chloe had redecorated, donating my classic, solid mid-century modern pieces to make space for a more vibrant, contemporary energy. The checks for the condo fees stopped coming. The mortgage payments never started. When I called Liam about it, Chloe answered, "Evelyn, hi. Liam's just in the middle of a virtual yoga session. Is everything okay? Just following up on the housing payments we discussed." "Ah, yes. We've been meaning to talk to you about that. Cash flow has been a bit tight with the wedding planning and my business expansion. We were hoping we could push the start date to the first of the year." They were a we that had existed for less than 6 months. Of course, the first of the year will be fine. The first of the year came and went. When I was in SoHo meeting a client, I drove past the Loft. A gleaming fire-engine red Porsche Cayenne was parked in the building's designated spot. Liam's beat-up Jeep was nowhere to be seen. I called him that night. "Hey Mom, what's up?" "Nice car, Liam." Silence, thick and heavy. Then, "How do you know about the car?" "I own the building. Remember, I was in the neighborhood." "That's a little invasive, don't you think?" "Invasive?" Checking on a multi-million-dollar asset I owned was now invasive. Chloe needed a reliable, safe vehicle for her client meetings in the Hamptons. He continued, defensiveness creeping into his tone. "We leased it. It's a business expense." "How wonderful for her business." "Speaking of expenses, when should I expect the first payment?" A long sigh. "Look, Mom, we need to have a real talk. We think that you're using the property as a form of control, like you're holding it over our heads to keep me in line." She says that kind of financial entanglement is toxic for family systems. "Toxic," I repeated, the word tasting like poison. "I see. I'm glad you're being open." Chloe's really an expert in relational dynamics. Yes, she was, and I was finally beginning to understand her area of expertise. The conversation with Liam happened on a Thursday. By Monday morning, I was sitting in the sleek, minimalist office of my lawyer and longtime friend, Benjamin Cruz. "Eve, talk to me," Ben said, steepling his fingers. He'd represented me since the early days of my firm. He'd handled Michael's complex estate, drawn up the airtight rental agreement for the SoHo Loft. "What's going on?" "I want to sell both properties, the Brownstone and the SoHo Loft." Ben leaned back, his chair emitting a soft sigh. "Both, Eve. That's the family home. And the Loft is a prime income-generating asset." "Are you sure?" I could have told him about the wedding reception that hadn't happened yet. I could have described the Porsche and the missed payments and the way my son now looked at me with a mixture of pity and irritation. Instead, I said, "I'm 62 years old. Ben, I want to simplify, liquidate, move into something smaller, something that's just mine. These are significant decisions, Eve. The Brownstone, especially. The last appraisal put it at just over $6 million, which is why I want it handled properly, discreetly, and quickly." Ben nodded slowly, his dark eyes searching mine. "I assume Liam is not aware of this." "Liam assumes a great many things. That is the core of the issue. He'll have to be notified as the sale progresses, as your heir." "But I am not dead, Ben." My voice was sharper than I intended. "The properties are in my name alone. They are my assets to dispose of as I see fit. Legally, that is correct, is it not?" "Legally, unequivocally. But Eve, the personal fallout." I thought of Chloe's whisper. Petitioning for conservatorship over the estate will be a formality. I thought of Liam calling me invasive and toxic. "Ben, what is your opinion of people who bite the hand that feeds them?" He gave a grim, understanding smile. "I believe they shouldn't be surprised when the feeding stops." "Precisely. How long? If we price them aggressively to sell, the Loft, 60 days, the Brownstone, it's a unique property. Could be maybe less if we find the right buyer. Price them to move. I want clean, fast transactions. No sentimental value markup." Ben made a note on his tablet. "Where do you want the proceeds deposited?" "A new account. At First United Trust. I'll have the details for you tomorrow." I stood up, smoothing my trousers, and bent. "One more thing. I need a deep, quiet background check. Chloe Abrams, 29, formerly worked in senior transition services. Let's call it a nagging maternal instinct. I'll have my best person on it. I left his office, the weight in my chest not gone, but transformed. It was no longer the heavy stone of dread, but the solid, manageable weight of a tool. I was no longer just reacting. I was building my own blueprint. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday in November. Liam's voice was strained, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. Mom, you need to come to the loft now. Good morning to you, too. Liam, is everything all right? Can you please just come? Jessica's at a retreat in Connecticut. We can talk privately. Privately, without Chloe's direct supervision. The chess pieces were moving. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove to SoHo, the rain streaking the windshield like tears. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, looking at the building. My building, the place where I'd envisioned my son building his future. Now, it was just a piece in a game I never asked to play. Liam opened the door before I could knock. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his hair a mess. He thrust a piece of paper at me. We got this. A notice of sale. We have 45 days to vacate. What the hell, Mom? I took the paper, glanced at it, and handed it back. How unfortunate. Who's selling? Don't play dumb with me. You're selling it. You're selling our home. I'm selling my investment property. There's a distinction. He stared at me, his face a mask of betrayal. We live here. Our life is here. We were going to start paying the mortgage. We just needed a little more time. The wedding was expensive. Chloe's business had some upfront costs. The car lease, I repeated softly, for the Porsche. That's not the point. The point is, you can't just pull the rug out from under us like this. Actually, I can. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded document. Check your lease agreement, the one you signed. Clause 7B, 30-day notice for termination at the owner's discretion. His face went ashen as he scanned the familiar document. I thought that was, I don't know, a legality, a formality for the insurance. All contracts are formalities until they're not. I stepped past him into the loft. It was now a sea of white carpets, white furniture, white artwork on the walls. It felt sterile, like a gallery waiting for an exhibit. You stopped paying rent after the first month. You leased a luxury vehicle while defaulting on your financial obligations to me. And according to some chatter I've heard, Chloe has been telling her friends that you two own this place. That last part was an educated stab in the dark, but the way his eyes darted away confirmed it. People ask questions. It's easier than explaining the situation. Easier to lie. You mean she was protecting our privacy? I folded the lease and returned it to my purse. Where is Chloe today, Liam? At a high-net-worth wellness retreat in Greenwich. She's building her client base. With what capital? She has investors. Do these investors know she lives rent-free in a property she doesn't own? Mom, you're being impossible. We're family. Family supports each other. You're right, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Family does support each other. When was the last time you supported me, Liam? Not with a problem you needed me to solve, or a bill you needed me to pay. When was the last time you called, just to ask how I was, to see if I was lonely, to ask if I missed your father? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The silence was more damning than any answer. You'll figure it out, I said, walking toward the door. You're resourceful. You always have been when you've wanted to be. I had my hand on the doorknob when I turned back. Oh, and Liam, the Brownstone is under contract as well, just in case Chloe was counting on that for her future plans. The sound of him shouting my name, Evelyn, Mom, wait, echoed in the sterile hallway, but I didn't stop. I was already 3 moves ahead. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The confrontation came 3 weeks later, not from Liam, but from Chloe. Her call came late on a Wednesday evening. Evelyn, we need to talk. No pretense. No saccharin indi. The velvet glove was off. Double quotes. Hello, Chloe. Have you found a new place yet? We're staying with my mother in Westchester. This situation you've created is untenable. I'm sorry to hear you're having difficulty. The rental market is quite competitive. Stop it, she hissed, her voice losing its cultivated calm. Stop playing the innocent. You know exactly what you're doing. I've sold 2 properties that belong to me. I fail to see how that is your concern. Those properties were Liam's birthright. Liam's birthright is what I choose to leave him when I die. Since I am very much alive, he is entitled to nothing. You can't just cut your son out because you're jealous of our relationship. I'm not cutting him out over a relationship, Chloe. I'm protecting myself from a predator. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, you vindictive old bitch. There it was, the polished facade, shattered. I may be old, Chloe, but vindictive implies I'm acting out of spite. I'm acting out of survival. Liam will never forgive you for this. I think you'll find he already has. Is there anything else? Actually, yes. Her voice shifted, becoming clinical, weaponized. Liam, he hasn't been himself since you dropped this bomb. He's been forgetful, disoriented. Last week, he drove to his old office building, the one he left 2 years ago, and couldn't figure out why his keycard didn't work. He's having mood swings. I'm genuinely concerned about his mental state. The chill that had started at the wedding reception now spread to my very core. She was laying the groundwork. Not for me, not yet. She was starting with him, a confused, vulnerable son, easily manipulated. It was a brilliant, evil strategy. That sounds concerning. Have you suggested he see a neurologist? I think the entire family system needs intervention. The dynamic between you two is pathological, Evelyn. The enmeshment, the financial control, the emotional manipulation. It's textbook. I've seen it 100 times in my practice. Have you now? I deal with dysfunctional family systems professionally. I know the signs, and I know how to fix them. And what is your prescription, doctor? Intensive family therapy, with a specialist in codependency and geriatric psychological issues. Geriatric, I was 62, not 90. But in her narrative, I was already a frail, confused elder. How thoughtful. I'll take it under consideration. Good. I'll send you a list of recommended practitioners, doctors who understand the complexities of aging and its impact on family. I'm sure you will. I hung up and stood in the center of my kitchen, my hand resting on the cool granite of the island Michael and I had chosen together. She was good. She was methodical. She was building her case, brick by bureaucratic brick, and she was using my own son as the foundation. But her arrogance was her flaw. She had warned me, and a warned Evelyn Sullivan was the most dangerous creature on earth. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The intervention arrived on a bleak December morning. I was reviewing architectural plans for a small, modern cabin. I was thinking of building upstate when I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. Not one vehicle, but several. The doorbell rang, its chime overly cheerful. I opened the door to find Liam, pale and tense, flanked by Chloe, who wore an expression of pained concern. Behind them stood a woman in crisp medical scrubs and a man in a cheap suit, holding a leather-bound clipboard. "Mom," Liam began, his voice shaky, "we need to talk." "Good morning. This is quite a delegation." I kept my voice light, pleasant. The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Dr. Miles Henderson from the Willow Creek Geriatric Assessment Center. Your family has reached out to us with some serious concerns regarding your well-being. How kind of them to be so proactive." Chloe moved to stand beside Liam, placing a protective hand on his arm. "Evelyn, we're here because we love you." Liam has been sharing his observations with Dr. Henderson. The impulsive property sales, the erratic financial decisions. It's just not like you. Liam wouldn't look at me. "You sold our homes, Mom. You left us with nothing. That's not rational." Dr. Henderson consulted his clipboard. "Mrs. Sullivan, are you currently under the care of a physician for any age-related conditions?" "Just my annual checkup. I'm in excellent health. Any memory lapses, difficulty with balance, reasoning. My memory is fine, my balance is better than yours, I'd wager, and my reasoning has never been clearer." The woman in scrubs stepped forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Nurse Amy. We're here to facilitate a transition to a safer environment. Sometimes, cognitive decline can prevent an individual from recognizing their own limitations." "How old are you, Amy?" That's not relevant. I'm 62. You look about You're going to explain the aging process to me." Dr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sullivan, your family has provided documentation of concerning patterns, financial impulsivity, social isolation. Asterisk, asterisk, what documentation?" Chloe pulled out her phone. "I've been keeping notes, Evelyn, for Liam's sake. Some of the things you've said, the paranoia, the accusations, they're not grounded in reality. May I see these notes?" "This isn't an inquisition, Mom," Liam said, a desperate edge to his voice. "We're trying to help you. By ambushing me with strangers, by trying to have me committed, Dr. Henderson can conduct a proper evaluation," Chloe said firmly, her voice a calibrated instrument of fake compassion. "He can ensure you're safe. Safe from what? From yourself? From making decisions that could irrevocably harm you and those who care about you. I looked at my son. I saw the little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest, his head a perfect, trusting weight. I saw the ghost of the man he could have been, buried under layers of manipulation and lies. Liam, I said, my voice low and clear, look at me. Do you truly believe I am incapable of managing my own life? He finally met my gaze, his eyes swimming with tears of confusion and guilt. I believe you need help, Mom, and Chloe. She knows how to get it for you. I saw it then, the final, devastating truth. He was lost to me, for now. I turned to Dr. Henderson. What is the proposed course of action? A 72-hour observational hold. We'll run a full battery of tests, cognitive, neurological, psychological. Then we can determine the best path forward for your care. And if I refuse, your family can petition the court for an emergency conservatorship, given the evidence of self-neglect and financial imprudence. I looked at their faces. Chloe's mask of feigned sympathy, Liam's tortured compliance, the doctor's professional detachment. This was the checkmate she had planned. Fine, I said, the word tasting of surrender, but feeling like strategy. Let me pack a bag. The relief on Liam's face was a physical blow. Thank you, Mom. This is for the best. I'm sure it is, sweetheart. I walked upstairs, my footsteps steady on the familiar wooden stairs. In my bedroom, with the door closed, I packed a small suitcase with comfortable clothes and my most important documents. Then I made 3 calls. The first was to Ben Cruz. It's happening, the play we discussed. His voice was grim. Eve, are you absolutely sure? Once we start this, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Remember the instructions. If you don't hear from me in 48 hours, execute phase 2. Consider it done. The second call was to the manager at First United Trust. I need access to my safety deposit box this afternoon. Yes, I understand the procedures. This constitutes an emergency. The third call was to a number I had committed to memory. A man named David Chen, a private investigator Ben had retained. His initial report on Chloe had been illuminating. Mr. Chen, it's Evelyn Sullivan. I believe it's time for you to have that conversation with your half-sister. *****. Willow Creek was less a facility and more a very nice, very expensive prison. The walls were painted in calming shades of beige and sage green. The carpets were thick, absorbing sound. It was a place designed for quiet forgetting. Dr. Henderson handed me off to a staff psychologist, Dr. Isabel Reed, a woman with a severe bun and eyes that held no warmth. Mrs. Sullivan, I'll be conducting your assessment, she said, gesturing for me to sit in a plush, uncomfortable chair. I understand there are concerns about your decision-making capacity. My family is concerned about their access to my money. Dr. Reed made a note. You seem to have a fixed belief regarding your daughter-in-law's intentions. It's not a belief, it's a fact based on evidence. Paranoia can be a feature of several cognitive conditions, she noted, her pen scratching against the paper. Dr. Reed, how many of your patients are here because their families find them inconvenient? I'm not sure I follow. I think you do. How long have you been practicing? 8 years. And in that time, how many family financial disputes have you seen medicalized? She didn't answer, just made another note. The tests began. They were tedious, insulting. Remember this sequence of words. Draw this clock. Who is the president? What year is it? I answered everything with calm, precise accuracy. I was not a confused old woman. I was a captive general, biding her time. I also found an ally, an orderly named Marco, a big man with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. He'd been at Willow Creek for a decade. They'd bring them in all the time. Mrs. S. He told me in a low voice while delivering my lunch tray. The ones with money, the kids get impatient, or the new spouses want a clear field. How does it usually end? I asked. Usually, the meds get adjusted until they're compliant. The papers get signed. It's a factory. And the ones who fight back, he gave me a slow, appreciative smile. Those are my favorites. The ones who are sharper than the people who put them here. They're rare, but they're the ones who win. Hypothetically, how would a sharp one win? Hypothetically, he said, lowering his voice further. She'd know her rights. She'd request copies of every document, every test result. She'd have someone on the outside, someone with power, who knew the whole story. And she'd have a piece of paper, something undeniable. Smart advice, Marco. I've got kids to put through college. Mrs. S. I can't fix the system, but sometimes I can help the right person give it a good, hard kick. On the morning of my third day, Marco slipped a thick manila envelope between my mattress and box spring. Special delivery, he murmured. But inside was the full dossier from David Chen. It was more damning than I could have imagined. Chloe Abrams, formerly Chloe Wexler. Her employment history wasn't just in senior transition services. She had been a caseworker for an agency that facilitated guardianships. There were 2 sealed complaints from families alleging she had manipulated their elderly relatives. Most damning of all was a record from Arizona, a charge of fraud and exploitation of a vulnerable adult, which had been mysteriously dropped after the elderly victim, a man named Arthur Phelps, unexpectedly signed over power of attorney to her, and then entered a long-term care facility. He died 6 months later. The estate was still in probate. There was also a handwritten note from David Chen. Mrs. Sullivan. Chloe is my half-sister, our father's second family. I've been trying to stop her for years. Your situation might finally be the one that sticks. Call me the moment you're released. I carefully reassembled the documents and handed them back to Marco. Would you mind keeping these somewhere safe for me? Of course. Hypothetically speaking, when might you need them? Later today. I have a feeling I'm about to receive a clean bill of health. He grinned. Funny how that works. Dr. Reed delivered the news with palpable disappointment. Mrs. Sullivan, my evaluation is complete. While you demonstrate some rigidity of thought and fixed beliefs, I find no evidence of cognitive impairment or psychiatric illness that would justify an involuntary hold. What a surprise. However, I strongly recommend ongoing family counseling. The relational dynamics appear toxic. I couldn't agree more. Your son is here to take you home. Home. To the Brownstone Chloe undoubtedly thought was now within her grasp. Liam hugged me in the stark white lobby. I'm so glad you're okay, Mom. I didn't hug him back. Were you? Chloe stood by the door, the concerned mask back in place. Welcome back, Evelyn. We were so worried. I feel perfectly clear-headed. Thank you. In the car, Chloe turned from the passenger seat. Evelyn, I think we all learned something from this. We need to communicate better, as a family. Communication is key, I agreed. I was thinking we could have dinner tonight, a fresh start. That sounds perfect. Why don't you both come to the Brownstone? 7 o'clock. Liam glanced at Chloe, then at me. Are you sure you're up for it? I won't be cooking. I'll have it catered. Wonderful, Chloe purred. We'll bring wine. Perfect. They dropped me off. I stood on the stoop of my home, the Brownstone that had seen so much life, so much love, and now, so much betrayal. I watched their car disappear down the street, then went inside and began to make my final preparations. The first call was to David Chen. I'm out. It's time. I'll be there, with company. The second was to Ben. Execute everything tonight. Eve, this is the point of no return. I passed that point the moment I heard her plotting at the wedding. And Ben, make sure the process server is at my door at 7:05. The third was to Marco. I need every single page from my file at Willow Creek. Every note, every assessment, already made copies. I'll messenger them over. The fourth was to the caterer. I need a dinner for 10 delivered at 6:45. Make it impressive. Spare no expense. I spent the afternoon in a state of calm focus. I reviewed the documents. I arranged the dining room. I set the stage. At 6:45, an absurd amount of exquisite food arrived. At 6:55, an unmarked sedan pulled up, and David Chen, accompanied by 2 serious-looking men in suits, who introduced themselves as detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit, entered my home. At 7 o'clock precisely, the doorbell rang. Come in, I called out. There are some people here I'd like you to meet. The look on Chloe's face when she saw David Chen was a masterpiece of pure, undiluted terror. It was the crack in the universe. The moment the entire carefully constructed house of cards began to tremble. Hello, Chloe, David said, his voice flat and cold. Long time. Liam looked from the detectives to me, bewildered. Mom, what's going on? Who are these people? Liam, this is David Chen, Chloe's half-brother. Chloe's composure shattered. Danny, what are you doing here? Cleaning up your mess, he replied.